Chapter 91. A difficult question. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. Boom. The gong rounded, and represented the official start of the theory examination. The examination paper was very quickly given out. A group of scholars instantly began to briefly glance over the questions. When they finished, their faces instantly turned into a bitter, forced smile. Difficult. It was too difficult. Who was the one who had set this paper? He actually even included the diagrams tactics, and also the I Ching volume. This was a notoriously hard volume in the law of Tao. Even the vocabulary used was foreign and exotic. Most of the scholars simply skipped over this volume. Even if there was someone who was able to read it, all they could do was read. At this moment, Fang Zhengzhi also saw the contents of the I Ching that were being tested. Without the countless numbers of later generations' annotations and interpretations, it was really very hard to understand. Just the terms mentioned in it. Force hexagram, field hexagram, sprouting hexagram, enveloping hexagram, attending hexagram, arguing hexagram, leading hexagram, grouping hexagram, small accumulating hexagram, treading hexagram, pervading hexagram, obstruction hexagram. All these could cause people to become dizzy. But, this evidently couldn't stump him. After all, the efforts of the later generations were great, and they had already used simple words to express the deep meanings behind this, and the summary was very beautiful. Other than the I Ching, the theory examination paper also tested the contents of the 30.6 stratagems, the main area being tested being the judgments and usages under different conditions. From the examination paper, one could infer that the capital theory examination, compared to the county theory examination, was indeed much harder. Furthermore, the questions were very flexible, hence the possibility of cheating and copying the model answer was much lower. Fang Zhengzhi saw this, he couldn't help but sigh. Even if Li Zhuangshi really managed to sabotage him, Cai Yongfeng probably wouldn't be able to care about him. After all, based on conventional reasoning, it wouldn't be possible for answers that were completely the same to appear. Hence, why would Cai Yongfeng take the risk to share his answers with Li Zhuangshi? Fang Zhengzhi didn't think further, and quickly started to answer the questions. The summary of the 30.6 stratagems was already done and classified nicely by later generations. Winning stratagems, desperate stratagems, enemy-dealing stratagems, attacking stratagems, etc. Theory.wise, Fang Zhengzhi had long ago committed these to heart. As the surrounding scholars scratched their heads and pondered hard, Fang Zhengzhi had already begun to write furiously, wearing a light smile on his face, just as if he was copying out notes in class. He's so powerful. Such a hard question, yet writing after taking just one look. Isn't this a little too extreme? The surrounding scholars were somewhat in disbelief. But, after all, Fang Zhengzhi had attained role champion in the Huaiyan County, hence the possibility of him failing the theory examination was ultimately very small. Even though they were dubious, but nobody believed that Fang Zhengzhi was scribbling nonsense. Hence, the surrounding scholars became much more stressed. They were initially already anxious, but when they saw Fang Zhengzhi's pen flying, and considered that the number of people passing the capital examination was limited, their foreheads instantly beaded with sweat. I must pass. The reward of this capital examination is going to be the one and only of its kind. When the scholars thought of that special reward in this capital examination, they all couldn't bear to give. One by one, they calmed down, and began to ponder seriously. But the capital examination's questions were really too difficult. Fang Zhengzhi wrote very quickly, and continued to write just as fast the entire way. He just had to sweep his gaze across the question to come up with the answer. This feeling was very comfortable, just like a university student studying literature competing with high school students in an essay competition. It was a bit of a bully. But, bullying once in a while, what was wrong with that? As he wrote, Fang Zhengzhi saw a weird question. Write from memory the 20.7th chapter in the Law of Tao and the 6 Secret Teachings. This question wasn't too difficult. After all, the 6 Secret Teachings was a text even the generals in his previous world had to read. The capital examinations emphasized military tactics, and this was understandable. However, when Fang Zhengzhi read, he was used to classifying them by name and title. When he read the 6 Secret Teachings, he would split them into 6 portions, then, giving a title to each portion. For example, Civil Strategy, Military Strategy, Dragon Strategy, Tiger Strategy, Leopard Strategy, Dog Strategy, etc. This didn't mean that he didn't read according to the order listed in the Law of Tao, but was instead a long-term habit. Then, herein lay the problem. Which chapter was the 20.7th chapter? Fang Zhengzhi stopped writing, and tried his best to recall what it was like when he was reading the 6 Secret Teachings. He thought for exactly 15 minutes, but didn't recall anything about the 20.7th chapter flashing across his mind before. Was he about to lose marks? Fang Zhengzhi looked to the back. There were still a few questions, but there weren't any further questions that caused him a headache in writing a chapter from memory. When studying, the teacher had taught examination skills. If one encountered a question one couldn't do, or didn't have the confidence in doing, then leave it blank first. Fang Zhengzhi decided to do the questions behind. The furious writing sound rang out again, and not too longer later, the questions behind had all been completed. Then, he had to come back to this problem regarding the 20.7th chapter again. Leaving a question blank. That is an action that disrespects my efforts. Fang Zhengzhi naturally couldn't leave this question blank. Not mentioning how many marks this was worth, this attitude alone wasn't very good. Then, he couldn't possibly write out the entire 6 stratagems. Even if he did this, he still might not get the marks. The question was about writing the 20.7th chapter from memory. If one wrote out the entire volume, it was evidently not answering the question. What to do? Fang Zhengzhi felt that he should sneakily take a peek. After all, the examination hall was huge, there would definitely be somebody who knows which chapter this 20.7th chapter was. He didn't ask for much, he just had to peek just one sentence, and everything would be solved. A very cheerful thought, hence Fang Zhengzhi carried it out. Opening his eyes wide, and using all his I-power, his neck even elongated. Unfortunately, the left and right side at the back were all completely separated by wooden boards. Even though the gap between every wooden board was only the length of a fist, but it was still rather hard to look to the left and right through this gap. As for the front, that was even more impossible. Everybody knew how hard it was to see the answers one was writing from behind him. Other than a sweaty back, even the slightest bit of paper wouldn't be seen. All right. Give up. Fang Zhengzhi wasn't a perfectionist, occasionally leaving a tinge of regret, or damaging a beautiful piece of work, was still acceptable. But, acceptable was acceptable. Giving up before the time was up was something he didn't wish to do. Hence, even though he clearly knew that he wouldn't be able to see anything, he still intensely and continuously swept his gaze about the examination venue. Sweeping his gaze across. Then, he suddenly saw somebody in the same situation as him. That was a fatty wearing brocade clothes. At this moment, the fatty seemed rather anxious. The beads of sweat that filled his forehead rolled down continuously, and his pair of eyes were wide open, looking left and right. And on his right-hand side, an examinee was discreetly lifting up his examination paper in the direction of the fatty. Cheating. The edges of Fang Zhengzhi's mouth curved into a smile. Against a fatty like that who he felt no animosity towards, he didn't wish to report him. 10 years of intense studying and the imperial capital examination, how could that be a joke? Never mind, let him be. Just as he thought, Fang Zhengzhi's gaze quickly landed on a patrolling invigilator. At this moment, the invigilator's gaze was intensely fixated on this fatty. On the other hand, the fatty continued to extend his neck, simply oblivious. Looks like they are about to be caught together. Fang Zhengji shook his head rather sadly. Just as he lamented that this fatty and the examinee on his right were about to be asked to leave the examination venue, his eyes suddenly lit up. Wait a minute. I know. Chapter 92. Proving Innocence. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. At this moment, the invigilator also moved. His footsteps were very light, and there was almost no sound. His footsteps weren't fast, but every step seemed as if he was floating in the air. To be an invigilator in the capital examinations, how could his abilities be weak? Fang Zhengji could almost confirm that within 2 seconds, this fatty would be caught. And, the youth cheating together with him would also face the same punishment. Report. A clear voice broke the silence of the examination venue, causing the fatty's head to instantly retract. The invigilator stopped in his tracks, a trace of anger appearing on his face. But, he still walked towards Fang Zhengji's direction. Because, the person who spoke, was Fang Zhengji himself. The surrounding scholars similarly raised their heads, all their gazes fixated upon Fang Zhengji. Reporting again. Don't tell me there is another person stupid enough to cheat with him. Within the crowd, there were people who heard about the incident when Fang Zhengji reported Meng Yushu during the Huai County examinations, hence, hearing Fang Zhengji's words, they instantly guessed. Report what? The invigilator walked in front of Fang Zhengji. This invigilator naturally wasn't the same one as before. After all, the invigilator had lost face, hence had long since went to some faraway examination venue to invigilate. He is peeking. Fang Zhengji pointed at the fatty. The fatty's initially somewhat worried face instantly turned white. You are speaking nonsense. Since when did I peek? Even though the fatty was anxious and afraid, but, admitting on the spot was impossible, hence he naturally began to argue intensely. When the surrounding scholars heard this, they more or less understood what had happened. Some people recognized the fatty and knew his academic abilities. Fang Zhengji report about the fatty should be true. But, was it really good to destroy somebody's future like that? The eyes of the invigilator lit up. He previously thought that Fang Zhengji wanted to defend the fatty, but now it seemed like that wasn't the case. You personally saw him peek. The invigilator understood. He was worrying about not catching the fatty in action, but now since somebody stood out to report, he naturally was happy to help Fang Zhengji. With the wooden board blocking, I couldn't see clearly. When he heard the invigilator's words, Fang Zhengji's mouth curved into a slight smile. His tone instantly changed, and suddenly started to mumble. You didn't see clearly yet you reported me. When the fatty heard this, his legs that were initially trembling and shaking all over stopped shaking. He instantly puffed out his chest and raised his head, seeming very open and honorable. Blocked by the wooden board. You should still be able to see clearly. The invigilator blinked a few times at Fang Zhengji and began to guide him systematically. Peeking during an examination required him to catch this in action in order to impose any punishments. But after Fang Zhengji's shout, there naturally wasn't any opportunity to catch him. But, if a witness who was in the examination as well as the invigilator both make accusations, then that was another matter altogether. Even though I didn't see it clearly, but, I definitely saw him turn his head. Furthermore, I got a method to prove that he was peeking just now. Fang Zhengji similarly returned a meaningful glance to the invigilator. The invigilator instantly understood tacitly. But, what method was there to prove that he was peeking? He actually couldn't think of one at the moment. When the fatty heard Fang Zhengji's words, his initial inflated confidence was as if burst by a needle, instantly decreasing by half. He had personally witnessed Fang Zhengji's methods before. A method to prove. It's over. Fang Zhengji wants to toy with me, what can I do? The fatty's heart instantly jumped into this throat. What? What method do you have to prove? Blood filled the fatty's face due to his anxious, causing it to seem flushed with red. There is a method to prove that he was peeking. The surrounding scholars also looked at one another, and didn't quite understand what Fang Jingji's method was. Tell me more. The invigilator signaled Fang Jingji to speak. Announce the answer. If he really can do the question, then naturally he would be able to answer it. If he couldn't do it, then naturally one can prove that he was peeking just now. Fang Jingji replied in a matter-of-fact manner. When the invigilator heard this, his face instantly darkened. Announce answers. This was the theory examination. Even though he evidently knew that the fatty would definitely not know, but if he really asked the fatty to announce his answers, this was indeed too extreme. And just announcing one's answers would prove that one didn't peek. This logic seemed rather plausible, but upon careful inspection, it was definitely not. Even if somehow, the fatty managed to announce this answer, who would judge whether it was right or wrong? When the surrounding scholars heard Fang Jingji's idea, they instantly began to laugh. Announce answers. Ha ha ha. How can he even think of this? Yes, what I mean is for him to announce some fixed answers which everybody would know. For example, writing from memory the 20th chapter in the Law of Tao and the 6 Secret Teachings. He doesn't have to recite the entire thing, he just has to say one sentence, then I'll believe that he didn't peek. But if he can't even recall one sentence, that proved that he completely doesn't know and hence, would definitely have peeked. Fang Jingji looked at the expression of the invigilator and the surrounding scholars, and continued to explain. The invigilator frowned once again. No matter what, whether it was writing from memory or not, announcing answers was something he definitely couldn't allow. Just as he prepared to open his mouth to prevent this, the fatty had already begun to shout excitedly. I know. He was really excited. Fang Jingji reported him and it was impossible for him to claim that he wasn't afraid at all. After all, he really was peeking just now, and thought that it was all over. But, he never thought that Fang Jingji would state such simple terms. In the entire examination paper, he naturally didn't know 80 to 90% of it. Even for the 20th chapter in the Law of Tao and the 6 Secret Teachings, he couldn't recite it completely. But, following what Fang Jingji said, as long as he recalled one sentence, everything would be fine. One sentence. That was such a simple request. To be able to pass the county examination, the text in the 6 Secret Teachings naturally had to be reviewed many times, one sentence was nothing to him. Now when our two armies, opposing each other, have deployed their armored soldiers and established their battle arrays, releasing some of your troops to create chaos in the ranks is the means by which to fabricate deceptive changes. In order to prove his innocence, the fatty was desperate. He simply didn't bother waiting for the invigilator to agree. Once Fang Jingji finished his sentence, he instantly announced the answer. But, his abilities were indeed limited. This sentence was a very queer sentence. It wasn't an opening, nor was it the conclusion. It wasn't even a main point of the chapter. It was purely just among the 2 or 3 sentences that he really remembered. But, after the fatty finished his sentence, he looked at Fang Jingji proudly, as if saying, "How is that? Are you convinced that I know now?" Reciting one sentence was a small matter. That's right, the 20th chapter indeed contains this sentence, I can confirm. The youth sitting beside the fatty instantly stood up upon hearing. He had all along been waiting for an opportunity to speak. Now, the opportunity finally came. Hence, he naturally couldn't give up this chance for him and the fatty to prove their innocence. The surrounding scholars also nodded one by one. Gazing at the invigilator and Fang Jingji, their meaning was similarly just as obvious. He had answered it, what are you going to do now? Shut up. If you dare announce the answer again, I will punish you for cheating. When the invigilator met the gaze coming from the surrounding scholars, his expression instantly became colder. Looks like I had really seen wrongly. Fang Zhengzhi instantly seemed disappointed and regretful. Then, he sat down with a guilty expression. The surrounding scholars were taken aback, they didn't expect Fang Zhengzhi to actually give up so easily. What was that all about? That's not right, Fang Zhengzhi let him off just like that. Even though they were somewhat regretful, but, when they saw the invigilator at the edge of raging, naturally nobody dared to speak again. One by one, their gaze returned back to the examination paper on their own desks. The invigilator coldly swept his gaze across the surrounding scholars, then looked at Fang Zhengzhi and instinctively glanced at the examination paper in front of Fang Zhengzhi. Then, he realized that the rest of the questions seemed to have been completed, but the only one left was writing from memory, the 20th chapter in the Law of Tao and the 6 Secret Teachings. It seemed to be blank. Could it be? A cold glint flashed in the invigilator's eyes. Chapter 93. 3 days you are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. This was cheating. And it was cheating very openly. The evidence was sufficient, and if such acts were condoned, could this venue still be an imperial examination venue? The invigilator's expression grew cold. Just as he prepared to reach his hands out to confiscate the examination paper, he realized Fang Zhengzhi had already started writing. King Wu asked the Tai Kung, in general, what are the great essentials in the art of employing the army? The Tai Kung replied. The ancients who excelled at warfare were not able to wage war above heaven, nor could they wage war below earth. Their success and defeat in all cases proceeded from the spiritual employment of strategic power. Those who attained it flourished, those who lost it perished. Now when our two armies, opposing each other, have deployed their armored soldiers and established their battle arrays, releasing some of your troops to create chaos in the ranks is the means by which to fabricate deceptive changes. Deep grass and dense growth are the means by which to effect a concealed escape. Fang Zhengzhi wrote very quickly, and didn't pause at all, just as if there was a law of Tao placed right in front of him. Wherever his pen landed, words flowed. In an instant, the 27th chapter of the 6 Secret Teachings, The Unorthodox Army, was completely copied out from memory. The invigilator's hand that was reaching towards Fang Zhengzhi's examination paper stopped forcefully in mid-air. His lips moved, as if he had just swallowed a fly, and forcefully swallowed back the words that were already in his mouth. How was this possible? He had initially almost confirmed that Fang Zhengzhi acted on purpose just now. But, why would things be like this? Writing out the entire text from memory just based on a random irrelevant sentence. No matter how he thought, it was something that couldn't possibly happen. Then what was wrong? The invigilator looked at the 20th chapter that Fang Zhengzhi wrote out from memory, and confirmed that not a single word was wrong. Furthermore, Fang Zhengzhi had written out everything right in front of him, hence naturally couldn't be suspected of copying. Then, where did the problem lie? The invigilator frowned deeply, but still couldn't understand. Invigilator, do you still have anything for me? Fang Zhengzhi had already finished writing. The feeling of completing the entire paper was very satisfying. Raising his head to see the invigilator still standing in front of him, the edges of his mouth curved into a smile. No, nothing. The invigilator really wanted to say something, but in the end, shook his head helplessly and left. Fang Zhengzhi glanced at the leaving invigilator, then glanced at the surrounding examinees and smiled faintly. Actually, cheating was an art. Boom. The gong signifying the end of the theory examination finally sounded. Countless scholars began to cover their faces and break out in tears once the gong sounded. This time, the capital examination paper was too hard, and many people had left more than half their paper blank. This represented that they were bound to miss the roll in this capital examination. As he left the examination venue, Fang Zhengji didn't encounter Li Zhuangshi again, and instead saw Yan Xiu at the gate, his expression cold as ice. Fang Zhengji couldn't be blamed. After all, Yan Xiu's position in the crowd was really too eye-catching. A huge wave of scholars swarmed out of the venue, but, very mysteriously detoured around Yan Xiu, causing a strange void to appear in a 2-meter radius around him. Yan Xiu stood just like that among the crowd, like a crane within a flock of birds. How was it? Yan Xiu asked. Not bad. Fang Zhengji replied. How about the I Ching? Yan Xiu continued to ask. Not a problem. Fang Zhengji was confident. Yan Xiu was silent, then looked up into the sky, as if thinking about something. A moment later, he retracted his gaze and looked at Fang Zhengji again. The combat examination, I will be role champion. Yan Xiu's tone at this moment was filled with confidence. I think I will be. Fang Zhengji was just as confident. Yan Xiu's lips quivered, as if he wanted to continue arguing, but in the end, he didn't speak further. Instead, he flicked open the golden bone silver thread fan in his hand with a whoosh, revealing a vast mountain river illustration. An indistinct ray of light flashed. It was unclear whether that was due to the reflection of the sunlight, or the glow of the paper fan. Fang Zhengji's gaze was fixated on that mountain river illustration, and a strange feeling welled up inside him. This illustration seemed too realistic. Is there a name for this fan? Fang Zhengji was rather curious. Yes, it's called the Mountain and River, Heaven and Earth fan. Yan Xiu lightly shook the golden bone paper fan. Mountain and River, Heaven and Earth. Fang Zhengji nodded and didn't speak further. The biggest advantage of walking with Yan Xiu was that Yan Xiu's body had a natural repulsion force. Anybody and anything that went past would divert their paths to skid around them. This saved Fang Zhengji a lot of trouble. For example, that fatty who took the examination with him. Even though he followed closely behind Fang Zhengji all the way, but didn't come up to greet him. The two walked slowly, under the gaze of the passers-by all the way into the room of the serene ink pond. The number of participants in this capital examination was much larger than before, hence the day of the release of results was set to 3 days later. Within the capital office, the invigilators were marking the scripts in an orderly manner. Every name was sealed onto the script. After being checked through by the invigilators, the scripts would be passed to a long table. Wearing a black official robe, Imperial Messenger Qin sat in the middle of the long table, and around him, there were a few other messengers with the word Imperial sewn onto their robes marking the scripts. After the long table was a rosewood chief table. An elderly man with a few tufts of silver hair, around the age of 50 sat in the middle. His eyes were half closed and seemed to be extremely pink with health. Similarly, he wore an official robe on his body, but what was different from the other messengers was his official robe was white in color. On the white official robe, an extremely lifelike picture of a bird was sewn in silver thread. Beautiful, beautiful. A messenger dressed in a black official robe gazed at the script in his hands. Seeming extremely excited, he quickly made his way to the elderly man. Elder Han, this examination paper is beautifully written, and imbued with deep meaning. The messenger opened the examination paper and passed it in front of the elderly in the white official robe respectfully. The elderly referred to as Elder Han wearing the white official robe at this moment also opened his eyes. A faint glint of light flashed in his eyes, and which vanished in an instant. Then, Elder Han received the examination paper and swept his gaze across it. Then, he lightly placed it down in front of the messenger. When the messenger saw this, he instantly took up the examination paper again, turned around, and returned to the long table without speaking further. He wrote, "Roll ready," beside the examination paper. The other messengers looked at the messenger at the long table and nodded lightly, then, began to conscientiously review the scripts once again. Not too long later, Imperial Messenger Qin also stood up. Holding an examination paper in his hand, he gradually made his way towards Elder Han. Elder Han, please read. Elder Han opened his eyes once again, and received the examination paper from Imperial Messenger Qin's hands. Sweeping his gaze across it, his initially semi-closed eyes widened, and his lips twitched, opening and closing slightly as if softly reciting the answers written on it. After exactly 15 minutes, Elder Han placed down the examination paper lightly. Then, smearing his hand across it, the name sealed onto the script was erased, revealing a list of examinee particulars. The next moment, Elder Han's brows threaded together in a frown, a very tight frown. There were 3 days to wait, hence the scholars in the River of Trust capital naturally wouldn't wait lonely, and instead, as if already agreed upon, appeared at the river side of the River of Trust. Because, here was a person who enchanted and captivated their souls. Beside the River of Trust, that flowed through the River of Trust capital, Yun Qingwu's pleasure boat stopped silently at the shore. It blended into the surrounding scenery, and in addition to the green willows that draped down, it was as beautiful as a fairyland. Countless scholars surrounded the pleasure boat and waited, craning their necks and looking around, just to be able to see Yun Qingwu's figure once. Some scholars even took out their precious collection of jewelry as well as renowned poetry and pictorial art, wishing to admire them together with Yun Qingwu. But, Yun Qingwu never came out once, as if Yun Qingwu simply wasn't inside the pleasure boat. These 3 days, Fang Zhengji's life was more or less similar to Yun Qingwu, and also didn't appear in the streets of the River of Trust capital. Instead, he stayed in the room and leisurely read his books, or drank tea and ate snacks with Yan Xiu. 3 days later. In front of the capital office door of the River of Trust capital, numerous scholars were already waiting in front of the roll stone. Each of their faces was filled with anxiety and nervousness. After all, this capital examination only had 1 round of theory examination. Passing it meant life, failing it meant death. Chapter 94. Rather generous. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. As the scholars were hoping for their names to appear on the roll stones, they were also guessing the top 3 in this time's theory examination. As someone who had just been transferred to the River of Trust capital, Su Jiu naturally wouldn't give up such a good opportunity to make money. Hence, early in the morning, he brought a few other boy servants to lay out tables not too far away from the capital office. Guess the roll champion, or the top 3, the pay out is high. Su Jiu called out with great energy. A group of scholars on the other hand surrounded the table, and incessantly fished out their money. Fang Zhengji was a punctual person, but he wasn't someone who liked to wait mindlessly in front of the roll stone. Hence, only now did he walk over shoulder to shoulder with Yan Xiu. As he passed by the betting table, he also heard Su Jiu's shouts. Thinking that Su Jiu was after all an acquaintance, he believed that he should still go and greet him. Furthermore, he also wanted to see whether there was anybody wise enough to bet on him attaining roll champion. Let me go take a look. Fang Zhengji looked at Yan Xiu. All right. Yan Xiu nodded, turned around and followed Fang Zhengji towards the betting table. Fang Zhengji didn't expect Yan Xiu to have such an interest, and was rather taken aback. But, he quickly understood. He heard that rich people always had a habit of gambling. Yan Xiu was rich. But, even if he wasn't obsessed, he definitely wouldn't be too conservative in such an area. Yan Xiu's appearance naturally caused the surrounding scholars to part ways very consciously. Fang Zhengji was satisfied at such an outcome. The feeling was just like shooting a high pressure water gun around. As Su Jiu called out to collect money, he realized that the scholars in front of the table had dispersed, and thought whether the government had come to raid. Raising his head, he realized it was Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu. Ah, it's young Master Fang, haha. Su Jiu instantly began to laugh, but quickly placed his hand at an area on the betting table. Fang Zhengji was also smiling. Because, he had already seen clearly the words on the table in front of Sujio. And where Sujio, covered with his hands, was exactly where his name was. Other than that, more than 10 names were densely written on the table. Below, pay-outs of all kinds were listed below them. Among them, Zhang Hetong's role champion payout was the lowest, yet the amount of people who bet that was the most. Next was Hua Kangan, the pay-out was more or less similar to Zhang Hetong. After them, were a few other random people. Tang Yulong, and even Kai Yongfeng's name were all listed under role champion. Can I bet on myself? Fang Zhengji smiled, haha. Young Master Fang, can you come with me? Sujio reached out his other hand, and signaled to Fang Zhengji. Fang Zhengji nodded, turned out and walked in the direction Sujio was pointing to. Not too long later, the 3 people arrived under a tree. Young Master Fang, my master had said that as long as you bet on yourself in attaining role champion, no matter how much you buy, we will pay double on the spot. Sujio smiled happily. I only wish to know, why is second class role below my name? And, the pay-out is so low. Fang Zhengji didn't directly reply Sujio's question. Seems like young Master Fang had seen it, haha. This is to earn money, I hope young Master Fang won't blame me. After all, we have to adapt to the cries of the crowd. Sujio smiled apologetically. Ah, nobody bet that I would enter the first class role. Fang Zhengji didn't press Sujio further. Nobody. Fang Zhengji said confidently, then, seemed to have thought of something. But, there is one person who bet that young Master Fang would be role champion. I initially thought that you sent someone to bet, but now it seems like it isn't. Someone bet that I would be role champion. Fang Zhengji gazed suspiciously at Yan Xiu, who was standing beside him with a cold expression. Yan Xiu shook his head lightly. If it isn't Yan Xiu, who could it be? Fang Zhengji was somewhat confused, who else would be so wise in the river of trust capital? Actually betting that he would become role champion. Say, should I still bet on myself? The edges of Fang Zhengji's mouth curved into a smile. My master said, however much you bet, we will pay the same amount on the spot. Sujio quickly laughed again. She is indeed quite generous. Never mind, help me check, who is the one who bet that I would become role champion? Fang Zhengji turned around and left. Anyway, he had never prepared to bet today, and he felt that earning money with such a method was akin to asking money from girls. All right. Sujio instantly nodded. After Fang Zhengji walked out a few steps, Sujio began to mumble again. Master is indeed supremely clever, young Master Fang really didn't bet. Wait a minute, I bet 100 taels. When Sujio's words just left his mouth, Fang Zhengji turned back again. Sujio's face instantly turned bitter. Young Master Fang, you really bet. With 200 silver taels on his hand, Fang Zhengji leisurely walked towards the roll stone, shoulder to shoulder with Yan Xiu. Then, very naturally, a path was formed for them. But, compared to the previous moment, there were much more sounds of chattering. Quick, look, Fang Zhengji is here. I had bet that Fang Zhengji will enter the second-class role. Brother Wang is indeed wise. I also bet that he would enter the second-class role. I bet Fang Zhengji will miss the role. Miss the role? Is your head squashed by a door? No matter how many people there are in this capital examination, and no matter how intense the competition is, Fang Zhengji's theory examination would never miss the role. He would definitely be on the second-class role. Exactly, betting that Fang Zhengji would miss the role. You are indeed stupid enough. The scholar within the crowd who bet that Fang Zhengji would miss the role was instantly condemned and denounced by the crowd, and pulled out a dozen strands of hair gloomily. And at this moment, a few result officials wearing black official robes also walked out from within the capital office. Give way. The leading result official gazed at the impenetrable crowd of people, and frowned. This time's capital examination had exactly 5 times the amount of people compared to before. They were indeed extremely tired. Very quickly, the crowd gave way. The result official directly walked in front of the roll stone, and in the same order as before, announced the second-class roll first. The leading result official fished out a black seal stone from his pocket and pressed it onto the roll stone. Instantly, with a flash of light rays, a list of densely packed names began to appear on the roll stone. Even though the number of people participating in the capital examination was 5 times more than before, but the number of people making it onto the roll was still fixed. All the scholars at this moment craned their necks and widened their eyes, carefully inspecting the roll stone for their names. Not too long later, the cries of scholars began to sound out. "Ha ha ha, I made it, I made it. I also made it, I also made it." A few of the people who made it onto the roll began to exclaim happily. After all, this capital theory examination was too hard. To be able to make it onto the second-class roll was already extremely lucky. And when they further thought about the special prize in this time's capital examination, they became even happier. Tisk, it's just a second-class roll, what is there to be happy about? Of course, there were also some smug and self-righteous people who mocked those who made it onto the second-class roll. "I won. I won. Ha ha. I won." Right at this moment, an untimely voice rang out from within the crowd. Chapter 95. Top 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. It was the person who pulled out several strands of hair after being condemned and denounced by the crowd. At this moment, he was gazing at the roll and dancing for joy, remarkably alike someone who had gone mad. The crowd also began to realize that Fang Zhengji's name wasn't on the second-class roll. Don't tell me Fang Zhengji really missed the roll. He should have missed the roll. After all, just the number of county theory examination roll champions participating in this capital examinations is already more than 10, furthermore, there are even scholars and talents in the hidden dragon roll coming from all over. There are only 20 names on the first-class roll. No matter what, it won't be possible that Fang Zhengji is among them. Sigh. Those who depend on luck will ultimately fail. My money. When they thought of the difficulty of entering the first-class roll, and the abilities of the people participating in the River of Trust capital examination this time, the crowd also more or less confirmed that Fang Zhengji should have missed the roll. Indeed, scholars from 5 capitals gathering at the River of Trust capital had successfully stopped Fang Zhengji from progressing. As they thought, the result official also took out a black seal stone and walked in front of the first-class roll stone, and pressed down. Instantly, golden rays of light flashed and 20 large names appeared. Hua Kangan. There's also Tang Yulong, Kai Yongfeng, Kong Xingping. Indeed, the competition in this first-class roll is too intense. Fang Zhengji's name isn't on the first-class roll. Do you think he can obtain top 3? I heard he never even entered a Hall of Dao before. To be able to attain roll champion for the county theory examination is already a miracle. Capital theory examination top 3. Ha ha ha. Zhang Heping also isn't in the first-class roll. He should be among the top 3. He is indeed the theory examination roll champion. Wait a minute, looks like Yan Xiu's name isn't here as well. Could it be? As the crowd discussed, somebody finally realized that other than Fang Zhengji's name, Yan Xiu's name also wasn't present on the first-class roll. Even though Fang Zhengji missing the capital theory examination roll after attaining roll champion for the county theory examination was somewhat unexpected, but it was still acceptable. But, how could Yan Xiu miss the roll? Hence, there was only one possibility. As they thought, the crowd's gaze turned to fix upon Yan Xiu, who was standing among the crowd with a cold expression. They were all guessing, what position would this youth from the Western Yang get in the River of Trust capital theory examination? Boom! A gong sounded, drawing the attention of the crowd back to the result official's body. Theory examination top 3 will be personally announced by the chief examiner. The chief examiner of this River of Trust capital examination is Imperial Academy Chief Imperial Messenger, Han Changfeng himself. After the announcement by the result official, a team of people walked out from within the capital office. Leading the team was a man with tufts of silver hair on his head, wearing a white official robe with a bird sewn onto it with silver thread, so lifelike that it seemed as if it was about to soar into the sky. It was Imperial Academy Chief Imperial Messenger, Elder Han Changfeng. Behind Han Changfeng, a few Imperial messengers with the word Imperial sewn onto their official robes followed. The chief examiner of the Huaiyan County, Imperial Messenger Qin, was also among them. It is actually Elder Han who's the chief examiner. All along, Elder Han is only the chief examiner in the imperial examinations, who would have expected that this time he actually supervised the capital examination. No wonder the questions in this time's capital theory examination are so difficult. Even though the questions were hard, but to be able to pass the capital examination with Elder Han as the chief examiner, it is indeed a huge benefit to one's future. When the crowd heard that the chief examiner this time was the chief imperial messenger Han Changfeng of the Imperial Academy, they were extremely excited. After all, in the dynasty, there existed the relationship between teachers and students. For example, this capital examination is supervised by Han Changfeng. Hence, under normal circumstances, scholars who pass this capital examination would be able to leverage on Han Changfeng's reputation and become Han Changfeng's student. This were the rules of the dynasty, and a form of respect to teachers. When Han Changfeng walked in front of the roll stone, everybody stopped their chattering. Pin-drop silence filled the venue. After all, with Han Changfeng's status and reputation in the great Xia dynasty, even the River of Trust capital head would have to give up his main seat. The River of Trust capital examination gathers scholars from 5 capitals across the northern desert, and is even referred to as a gathering of talents. The Imperial Academy emphasizes this strongly. To have the opportunity to become chief examiner of the River of Trust capital examination, this old man feels very pressured. Han Changfeng's tone was amicable and good-natured, and didn't assume great airs. He even referred to himself as an old man, rather than his status as chief imperial messenger, causing the scholars below to instantly feel a sense of closeness. Fang Zhengji didn't recognize Han Changfeng, hence he looked at Yan Xiu, wanting to infer Yan Xiu's impression of Han Changfeng from his expression. However, Yan Xiu's expression was calm and cold as always. The top 3 in the capital examination is first read by the invigilators, then passed to the individual imperial messengers to review, and finally selected by me. If anybody is against the decisions, you can request for a review at the Imperial Academy. Now, I'll announce the top 3 of this capital examination. Linjiang Capital, Tianhe Academy, Zhang Hetong. When Han Changfeng finished speaking, he paused for a moment, then a result official revealed Zhang Hetong's particulars and experiences on the 3rd position of the first-class roll. Zhang Hetong is 3rd. I never thought that Yan Xiu's theory examination abilities would actually be above Zhang Hetong. Leaving home at 16, this time, the Yan family is going to produce another talent to shock the world. When the crowd heard that Zhang Hetong was 3rd, they were startled, and began to discuss softly. And among the crowd, a group of scholarly-looking people also began to congratulate a man wearing green brocade clothes. But, the man wearing the green brocade clothes didn't look too happy. 2nd, Western Liang Yan family, Yan Xiu. After waiting for Zhang Hetong's name to appear, Han Changfeng didn't wait further and immediately announced the name of the 2nd place. Yan Xiu is 2nd place. Then who will be the roll champion of this theory examination? The crowd's gaze skirted around Fang Zhengji, and concentrated on Yan Xiu. On the other hand, Yan Xiu's expression was as cold as ever, just as if everything was going according to his expectations. But, when he looked at Fang Zhengji who was standing beside him, his gaze seemed mysteriously complicated. Fang Zhengji was also looking at Yan Xiu. He wanted to say a few sentences to congratulate him, but he knew that Yan Xiu would probably not be very willing to hear them. The reason was simple. Because Yan Xiu lost in the theory examination. "Can you treat me to a meal?" Yan Xiu suddenly spoke. "Can we eat in the Moonview restaurant?" Fang Zhengji asked back. "Can." Yan Xiu nodded. When the crowd heard the conversation between Yan Xiu and Fang Zhengji, they were all somewhat confused. Yan Xiu had evidently obtained second place, why did he ask Fang Zhengji to treat? Could it be that Yan Xiu believed that Fang Zhengji would be world champion? How was such a thing even possible? If a person who didn't even study a single day in the Hall of Tao attained the world champion for this River of Trust Capital Theory examination, what would all the scholars and students in the world say? Don't tell me every student and scholar studying in the Hall of Taos of the Great Xia dynasty are all swines. Chapter 96. Secret revealed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. This was what everybody thought in their hearts. This might not be due to hate, and more likely due to pride. A person who never entered a Hall of Tao before, relying solely on self-study was able to defeat them. Then they really had to doubt their own intelligence. This River of Trust Capital Examination, Theory Examination World Champion, Northern Mountain Village, Fang Zhengji. As Han Changfeng announced the two words, Fang Zhengji, their entire atmosphere in the venue instantly became very strange. In reality, when they heard the three words Northern Mountain Village, they were already stunned. Theory Examination World Champion. Fang Zhengji. Fang Zhengji again. Really Fang Zhengji? The mouths of all the scholars were agape. They had thought of a million possibilities, but they had never thought that this River of Trust Capital Theory Examination World Champion would actually be Fang Zhengji. A criminal demand order. Talented scholars from the 5 capitals in the northern desert left their 4 capitals, and entered the one River of Trust Capital. But even so, they still couldn't prevent Fang Zhengji from attaining world champion of the theory examination. How was this possible that talented scholars from the 5 capitals of the northern desert would actually lose to a village youth which nobody knew, who had even never stepped into a Hall of Tao before? "I don't believe." A voice rang out from the crowd. "Yes, I don't believe either." Another voice followed closely. Nobody believed, and nobody was willing to believe. If Fang Zhengji attained the world champion of the county examination, it could still be explained using luck. But, even when scholars from the 5 capitals gathered at the River of Trust Capital, he was still able to attain the theory examination world champion. Nobody believed that such a thing was possible. Actually, when I saw the name on the examination paper, I was just as shocked as you all, and also believed that such a thing was possible. Recalling the past when I studied hard for 10 years before being able to attain top 3 in the capital examination, I indeed feel rather hesitant. Han Changfeng wasn't at all enraged by the voices of the scholars, and instead his expression was filled with calm. When the crowd heard his words, they quietened down. Because Han Changfeng reflected the hearts of the crowd, everybody had studied in an academy or Hall of Tao, and worked studiously each day. Yet, they weren't able to compare to a village youth who didn't even enter a Hall of Tao. How could they accept this? But if I tell you about an incident, I believe your thoughts might change. Han Changfeng saw that the crowd went silent, and continued to speak. An incident. Don't tell me Fang Zhengji has something else that is even more shocking. He is just a normal village youth. The crowd was confused, but still waited silently for Han Changfeng to speak. 8 years ago, the Divine Constabulary was spreading Tao when they passed by the southern mountain village of the Huaiyan County, and coincidentally brought along an illustration of all creation into the mountain village to spread Tao. As Han Changfeng spoke, his tone was actually slightly moved. 8 years ago. Illustration of all creation. Everybody looked at each other, not understanding what was the reason Han Changfeng was bring up this incident at this moment. But, the 4 words, illustration of all creation, caused everybody to have thought of a possibility. But, this possibility quickly vanished in a flash. 8 years ago. How old was Fang Zhengji? Only 6 or 7. How was that possible? As the crowd was filled with doubt, nobody noticed a person who had initially turned around and prepared to leave, suddenly stood rooted to the ground. It was Li Zhuangshi. After 1 day of suffering, he had finally decided to stay. Because, he wanted to see how far Fang Zhengji could go. Previously, when he heard that Fang Zhengji was the world champion, he had already prepared to leave silently. But, Han Changfeng's words caused him to stay once again. 8 years ago, the scene of the divine constabulary bringing the illustration of all creation to the southern mountain village appeared in front of his eyes. Then, the expression on his face suddenly froze. Because he knew very clearly what had happened at that time. Could it be, the illustration of all creation was really solved? It was Fang Zhengji. The 6-year-old Fang Zhengji. But, at that time. At the time, even the Hall of Tao wasn't established. He had never even come into contact with books, this. Solving the illustration of all creation. How was this possible? How was this possible? Li Zhuangshi's heart was in an intense struggle, and fixated his gaze on Han Changfeng's body. He wanted to hear Han Changfeng finish his words, stand out and tell Han Changfeng that at that time, there wasn't even a Hall of Tao in the southern mountain village. And Fang Zhengji, at that time, hadn't even started to self-study. How was that possible? I guess that all of you wouldn't want to believe this, but the fact is, 8 years ago, that illustration of all creation was solved on the spot. And at that time, Fang Zhengji wasn't in the northern mountain village, and instead belonged to the southern mountain village. When Han Changfeng said this, his expression also seemed to change slightly. A 6-year-old solving the illustration of all creation. Since the dawn of history, only that girl from the divine constabulary had managed to do it. Even though he didn't witness it personally, but when he thought of a village kid causing the illustration of all creation, which had baffled countless talents and scholars, to radiate with light, even he was unable to maintain his calm. 6-year-old, what kind of monstrous talent was that? The crowd's mouth opened again, their eyes completely round. But, compared to their previous shock, this time, it was a sense of horror that came from deep within their souls. Li Zhuangshi's face was flushed red. He had personally witnessed the scene that day. But, wasn't that due to the sunlight? It really was Fang Zhengji, the 6-year-old Fang Zhengji. Seemed like. From the start, he was already destined to lose. But what was laughable was that he still racked his brains trying to plot against the Fang family. How laughable, how ignorant. Yan Xiu's gaze also turned towards Fang Zhengji, but this time, in his eyes, a rare expression of shock appeared, as if he had seen a scary monster. I believe my meaning should be very clear. Then, does anybody now still have any doubts about Fang Zhengji attaining world champion in the theory examination? As he spoke, Han Changfeng's gaze swept across the crowd, and finally landed on Fang Zhengji's body. In reality, everybody's gaze was trained on Fang Zhengji. Solving the illustration of all creation at 6 years of age. How terrifying was that? Within the crowd, Fang Zhengji stood silently on the spot. Looking at the gazes that fixated onto him from all directions, he felt slightly taken aback. He indeed had never thought that Han Changfeng would send people to investigate him. Furthermore, uncovering the incident 8 years ago when he solved the illustration of all creation. This was Fang Zhengji's biggest secret. But within a matter of 3 days, Han Changfeng had managed to uncover his biggest secret. It didn't matter how he did it, but, now, this secret was already revealed to the world. Then, from now on, he was going to be at a place where the wind and the waves are the fiercest, the heart of struggles. The previous county examination, there was already the incident of a demon using the law of Dao examination to kill human talents occurring. With Han Changfeng's experiences, shouldn't he have been able to consider this aspect? Then, revealing this under thousands of staring eyes, it was probably not only for explaining the theory examination role champion. With Han Changfeng's reputation, being the chief examiner of the capital examination and personally deciding the theory examination role champion, even if he didn't explain, so what? When Fang Jingji thought of this, he instinctively forced his gaze towards Han Changfeng's eyes. He really wished to know why did this Imperial Academy's chief Imperial Messenger would reveal this secret in front of the entire crowd. What were his motives? Chapter 97. Heart of the Struggle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. When Fang Jingji looked at Han Changfeng was also looking at Fang Jingji. Their eyes met. Han Changfeng instantly felt as if a sharp sword was pointed at him. The expression in his eyes instantly changed, and the faint movement of air began within the sleeves of his white official robe. That expression in his eyes is so sharp. This sharpness has already reached such a stage. Elder Han. Right at this moment, Imperial Messenger Qin, who had all along been standing behind Han Changfeng, suddenly spoke. Han Changfeng frowned, and the air moving in his body quickly vanished. A moment later, the expression on Han Changfeng returned to its original, calm state. Yes. The announcement of the theory examination top 3 has been completed. May I seek permission to inform the Imperial Academy as soon as possible, and pass it to the Left Prime Minister for reviewing. Imperial Messenger Qin instantly asked respectfully. The Left Prime Minister is busy with imperial affairs. We'll wait for the combat examination to end, and report them together. Han Changfeng thought for a moment, and shook his head. Roger. Imperial Messenger Qin nodded and withdrew. When Han Changfeng looked at Fang Jingji again, he didn't feel the sharpness from before. What was left was the faint smile of a sunshine boy. Then, he also noticed Yan Xiu, who had been standing beside Fang Jingji all along with an ice-cold expression. After a moment of thought, Han Changfeng quickly made his way beside Fang Jingji. Are you Fang Jingji? Han Changfeng's tone of asking was only left with the amiability of an elder. Yes. Fang Jingji nodded. Not bad, solving the illustration of all creation at 6 years of age, planting the heart of Tao. Your future would definitely be limitless. This combat examination, I have great expectations of your performance. Han Changfeng smiled gently. Thank you, Chief Imperial Messenger. Fang Jingji returned the same gentle smile. Ha. Good, very good. Han Changfeng nodded, and instantly turned around and left. Fang Jingji gazed at Han Changfeng's leaving figure, and the smile on his face didn't change at all. He didn't know what was Han Changfeng's intentions, but, if one really wanted to talk about the heart of the struggle, he seemed to have long ago stood at the top. To the Moonview restaurant. Fang Jingji turned around and looked at Yan Xiu. Okay. Yan Xiu nodded. As such, the two walked shoulder to shoulder towards the direction of the Moonview restaurant. As the crowd of scholars looked at the leaving figures of Fang Jingji and Yan Xiu, they were filled with admiration. To be able to be praised personally by Han Changfeng was something every scholar under the skies would yearn for even in their dreams. But, other than admiration, there was also jealous, and even a mysterious sense of hatred. The crowd gradually dispersed, and the doors of the capital office slowly became empty again. All that was left were two huge words glowing with golden light at the position of first-class role champion. Fang Jingji. River of Trust Capital, Theory Examination Role Champion. Within the Moonview restaurant. In an exquisite study room, Wu Yue, wearing a black pleated skirt, was reading the books on her table. The rays of light passed through the window and landed on her body, adding a lush glow to her already beautiful face. Master, Su Jiu asks to meet you. A lady in a red skirt respectfully spoke at the door. Yes, let him enter. Wu Yue nodded, but didn't put down the book in her hand. Roger. The maid withdrew. Not too long later, Su Jiu, dressed in his boy servant attire, walked into the study room. But, he stood still after taking 2 steps, and didn't dare to advance further. Master, this is the accounting records for this month. Su Jiu fished out an account book from his pocket. Put it down. Wu Yue nodded. Roger. Master is indeed smart and wise. Fang Zhengji had really attained the theory examination role champion, and the betting table set up outside the capital office indeed earned quite some money. But, there's a small accident. Before the release of the roll, young Master Fang wanted to bet, and I replied according to Master's orders. Young Master Fang had initially already left, but afterwards due to the slip of my tongue. He came back and bet the 100 taels. When Su Jiu reached the end of his sentence, his voice very evidently became softer. You will go and pay 200 taels of fine, then find the 4th sister to receive your punishment. Wu Yue's actions still didn't change at all. Thank you, Master. Su Jiu breathed a sigh of relief, and instantly withdrew. After Su Jiu withdrew, Wu Yue put down the book on her hands, turned around and looked at the sky outside the window. Smiling, she spoke. Only betting 100 taels. Looks like his impression of Su Jiu isn't too bad. Master, young Master Fang is here. Do you wish to meet him? At this moment, the maid's voice sounded out from outside the door again. Alone. Wu Yue's eyes lit up. There is also young Master Yan Xiu from the Western Liang Yen family. The maid replied respectfully. Why did he bring a wooden plank here? This is indeed dull. Go and prepare first, and treat them well. Wu Yue twitched her mouth and seemed somewhat unhappy. Roger. The maid quickly responded, and withdrew. Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu sat down in an exquisite room in the Moonview restaurant. The maid returned with another teapot filled with fragrant tea, and gave them the menu. The previous time Fang Zhengji came to the Moonview restaurant, he had never seen the menu. After all, Wu Yue had paid the bill. Hence, his only impression was that the Moonview restaurant's dishes were not too bad. With the menu placed down, as the person treating the guest, Fang Zhengji naturally, very courteously, pushed the menu towards Yan Xiu, signaling him to order as he wished. On the other hand, Yan Xiu didn't show Fang Zhengji any trace of politeness, and in an instant ordered a pile of dishes of all kinds. There were no less than 20 kinds of dishes. Fang Zhengji instinctively felt around for the money in his pocket. 3 pieces of 100-tael notes, and a bag of broken silver. It should be enough for a meal. After Yan Xiu had finished ordering, Fang Zhengji wanted to order a few fruits for dessert, hence, reached out his hand and picked up the menu to take a look. Just this one look caused Fang Zhengji to be completely struck dumb. This is a robbery. Fang Zhengji had indeed already prepared himself. He knew that the dishes in the Moonview restaurant would definitely not be too cheap. But, he had absolutely never expected it to be so expensive. Roughly sweeping his gaze across it, based on what Yan Xiu had just ordered, it required at least 500 or 600 taels of silver to pay it off. Could it not be so dark? Treating a guest and not bringing enough money, what to do? Fang Zhengji really wanted to ask, can I write an IOU? After all, there isn't any card swiping in this world. Just as he was deep in distress, somebody walked in from outside the door. It was Su Jiu. At this moment, Su Jiu instinctively felt around on his buttocks, but the smile on his face was very respectful. The way he looked at Fang Zhengji was remarkably alike looking at a relative. Fang Zhengji was also smiling. Because, when he saw Su Jiu, he also felt as if he had seen a relative. Jiu congratulates young Master Fang for attaining the Capital Theory Examination Role Champion. At the same time, also congratulates young Master Yan Xiu for attaining second in the capital theory examination. As Su Jiu spoke, he bowed towards Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu. Ha ha. When he heard Su Jiu's congratulatory words, the smile on Fang Zhengji's face became even wider. Chapter 98. Win. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations, Young Master Fang and Young Master Yang, please enjoy. Jiu will take my leave. Even though Su Jiu was here to express his congratulations towards Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu, he knew that in such a situation, as a boy servant, he wasn't qualified to enter. Hence, after expressing his congratulations, Su Jiu prepared to leave. But, would Fang Zhengji allow Su Jiu to leave just like that? Naturally that wasn't possible, hence, he quickly halted Su Jiu. Since you are here to express your congratulations, then let's eat together. Fang Zhengji very generously pointed to the seat beside him. Yan Xiu looked at Fang Zhengji and didn't speak. All along, he was never a person who chose friends based on their social status, else why would he be together with a poor person like Fang Zhengji? Furthermore, today, Fang Zhengji was the host. Hence, Fang Zhengji inviting a person who expressed congratulations to eat together was within the etiquette. However, Su Jiu received a huge shock. Not mentioning Fang Zhengji's status in front of Wu Yuer, even based on these two people's achievements in front of him, one was the role champion of this capital theory examination, and the other was second place, and was young Master Yan Xiu of the Western Liang Yin family. No matter how he looked at the situation, there was no way that he could join them. But now, Fang Zhengji actually invited him to join them. How honorable was that? The previous time, due to him getting close to Fang Zhengji, he was transferred from the Huai'an County to the River of Trust capital by Wu Yuer. Now that he ate with Fang Zhengji, without thinking, his position was about to rise again. Thank you, young Master Fang, thank you, young Master Yan Xiu. Su Jiu furiously rubbed his hands, and very gingerly walked towards the dining table and sat down. He naturally couldn't just leave. After all, such an opportunity was too rare. When Fang Zhengji saw Su Jiu sit down, the smile on his face became even more amiable. If Su Jiu didn't seek anything, then under normal circumstances Su Jiu should have left after being invited to eat. But now, Su Jiu had already sat down, hence, Fang Zhengji couldn't be blamed. Fang Zhengji wanted money, Su Jiu also wanted money. It seemed somewhat conflicting, but in reality, there was no conflict. Because, the method both of them used to gain money was different, but, one thing was definite. This deal a win-win situation. The three sat together. With Su Jiu joining them, things such as pouring water and wine were very generously taken over by Su Jiu. He even requested for the maids to withdraw, and everything was carefully taken care of by him. Just as Su Jiu expected, this news reached Wu Yuer's ears very quickly, and caused the eyes of Wu Yuer, who was reading in the study room, to flash with a hint of shock. Eating together. This Su Jiu is indeed clever. This feast was initially a celebratory feast. Yan Xiu didn't like talking, but with Su Jiu joining them, naturally there were some rumors and gossips about the River of Trust capital, hence the atmosphere became livelier. The meal lasted for almost an hour. When he saw that it was more or less finished, Fang Zhengji spoke again. Today, both Yan Xiu and I entered the first class role. To have Jiu to celebrate with us, the treatment indeed feels very different. Luckily, Jiu didn't bring any presents, else I would indeed be rather guilty. Fang Zhengji expressed his gratitude to Su Jiu. Su Jiu's hand that was holding onto a cup instantly halted. Didn't bring any presents. After a moment of shock, he regained his senses. That's right, if all he did was express his congratulations and not join them for the meal, it was still alright. But now that he had joined them, if he really complied with Fang Zhengji's statement about not bringing a present, that was really too rude. But, he really hadn't thought that he would be able to join them. Then, where was he supposed to get a present now? When he thought of this, beads of sweat instantly broke out on Sujio's forehead. He hadn't at all prepared a present. This didn't seem very easy to settle. This meal is indeed very nice, I wonder how much it costs. Ah Jiao is well versed with this Moonview restaurant, I believe you should know. Fang Zhengji looked at the dishes placed in front of him and casually remarked. Just as Sujio prepared to respond, his eyes instantly lit up. Having been a runner for so many years, Sujio's greatest ability was discerning people's intentions from their body languages, and understanding the thoughts of the upper class. Hence, he instantly understood. Fang Zhengji was helping him out of embarrassment. With Sujio's intelligence, he was definitely able to understand Fang Zhengji's intentions. Ah Jiao was in a hurry, hence didn't prepare any exquisite presents. In this Moonview restaurant, Ah Jiao can also be counted as half a host. To have received such good treatment from young Master Fang and young Master Yan Xiu, if you don't mind, why not let Ah Jiao fulfill my responsibilities as a host? Sujio said probingly. Fang Zhengji felt that at this moment, he should false reject. But, as the saying goes, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if Sujio really changed his mind, what was he supposed to do then? Alright, then thank you Ah Jiao. Fang Zhengji said without a trace of politeness. Sujio instantly smiled. This way, the issue about his present was resolved. Young Master Fang and young Master Yan Xiu please enjoy, Ah Jiao will leave for a while. When he finished his sentence, Sujio pushed open the door and left. With a wave, he gathered the maid. Put this on my bill. Sujio said with a generous expression. When the maid heard, they stared at Sujio with rounded eyes. Brother Jiao, are you sure? This meal isn't just any normal meal. Isn't it just a meal? Sujio waved his hands. Just as he prepared to re-enter the room, he suddenly felt as if something was wrong. You mean there is a problem with this meal? It's master's intentions. The maid nodded. How? How much money? Sujio's voice started to tremble. Rounding off, the total is 680.8 taels. The maid's expression was that of pity. Ah! This is Rob. Sujio instantly felt as if he was struck by lightning and stood dumbfounded on the spot, his face filled with absolute disbelief. In the Moonview restaurant, within an exquisite study room, Wu Yue very quickly received this news. Her plot seemed to have been foiled. Because, the person paying the bill was Sujio, a pitiful scapegoat. Seems like it is like this, aha. Looks like I really underestimated his shamelessness. Wu Yue's lips parted slightly, and smiled faintly. The complexion of her face seemed to glow even brighter, just like a seductive black spirit. Then, Wu Yue picked up her brush, and a row of beautiful words appeared on the white paper in front of her. Pass this to young Master Fang. Yes, Master. A maid quickly walked towards the study table, and gingerly folded the piece of paper and placed it into an envelope before slowly withdrawing. After a fulfilling meal, Fang Zhengji looked at the color of the sky and wanted to take an afternoon nap, hence pulled Yan Xiu along and left. Just as he reached the doorstep, a maid appeared beside Fang Zhengji, holding a letter in her hands. This caused Fang Zhengji to become rather anxious. Sujio said that he was about to foot the bill, but afterwards, he had never returned. He shouldn't have reneged and ran away. Young Master Fang, my master passed this to you. The maid respectfully passed the letter to Fang Zhengji. When Fang Zhengji heard this, he breathed an inwardly sigh of relief. If Wu Yue was at the Moonview restaurant, then his situation wouldn't be so bad that he wouldn't be able to leave. Hence, he nodded, reached out his hand and received the letter from the maid. Then, unfolding it, his eyes instantly narrowed. Yun Qinggu. Chapter 99. Day of the combat examination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. The content within the letter wasn't much, just one simple sentence. Furthermore, just the content alone wasn't something very shocking. Very simply, it stated that in the capital examination, Yun Qingwu was the person who sent somebody to bet on Fang Zhengzhi attaining role champion. Yun Qingwu betting that he would be role champion. Fang Zhengzhi indeed felt somewhat curious inside. He only met with Yun Qingwu once, how was she so sure? Another thing which Fang Zhengzhi was curious about was Wu Yuer's control of information and intelligence. Yun Qingwu sent somebody to buy that bet, and from that intention it could be inferred that she didn't want people to know. Even though Wu Yuer was the person behind the betting scene, but to truly trace back to the real buyer, it still required some time. Yet, she was able to give a confirmed reply very quickly. There was only one possibility. That was that Wu Yuer's control of information regarding everything in the River of Trust capital had already far surpassed what Fang Zhengzhi was able to imagine. Wu Yuer. Fang Zhengzhi pocketed the letter, looked up into a window of the Moonview restaurant, and his mouth curved into a smile. A lady, such a young lady. Yet being able to control the vast underground world. If somebody said that this lady didn't have any hidden powers behind her, Fang Zhengzhi would definitely not believe it. Help me tell Yuer that I will come and see her again, Wax. Yuer. When the maid heard the way Fang Zhengzhi referred to Wu Yuer, a trace of horror flashed across her face. But, very quickly it returned back to the initial state of calm. Yes, young Master Fang. Fang Zhengzhi and Yan Xiu left. Yet, a figure appeared at the window that he looked at just now. That was a beautiful and alluring face, but at this moment a slight red blush appeared on this face, staring at Fang Zhengzhi's leaving figure. Wu Yuer's body trembled slightly, and spat lightly. Mwax. What a number one lecher on earth, he is really. The most shameless. 3 days later, in the imperial capital of the Great Xia dynasty, the Yan capital city. The huge city walls guarded this ancient city that had went through countless blood storms. As the capital of the Great Xia dynasty, what the defensive structure of this ancient city was naturally the foundation of national defense. On the city walls, countless soldiers wearing shiny armors, wielding long spears patrolled non-stop, and behind the city walls, was the garrison of patrol guards in the imperial capital Yan. Numerous wooden target boards used for training were nailed deeply into the ground. On the military drill ground, rows of patrol guards were practicing their spear tactics. Every spear thrusted out brought along an icy cold glint. In the middle of the drill ground was a huge wooden military tent, and on the tip of the tent was a golden flag. On it, the huge word Duan billowed in the wind. Within the military tent, a youth around the age of 20.3 to 20.4 sat, his features were sharp as a sword, and he wore a white official robe with an illustration of an animal sewn onto it with golden thread. I have received information that the results of the River of Trust Capital Theory Examination Role Champion are out. The youth's gaze trained onto an old man wearing a black-white Dao robe sitting behind. Lord, this person can rise above so many scholars, and is indeed rare and valuable. Furthermore, I heard that this person at 6 years of age had already managed to solve the illustration of all creation, and planted the heart of Tao. Should we, Nav Om, Elder One, have you forgotten that piece of criminal demand order? A scholarly-looking middle-aged man sitting opposite the black-white Dao-robed man interrupted him at this moment. This caused a tinge of unhappiness to flash across the old man addressed as Elder One, but, this tinge of unhappiness quickly vanished. Qi Gaiyan's criminal demand order shocked the world, how can I forget? But, ever since Qi Gaiyan attained the Double Dragon Role Champion, she entered the Heaven Dao Pavilion and never took a single step out of the Heaven Dao Pavilion within a year. Furthermore, nobody had ever since heard any news from her. But, this time, due to a youth, she gave out a criminal demand order. Don't you think that there is something weird about this? Yes, I expressed the same curiosity as Elder Wen. I wonder what Elder Wen is trying to convey. When the youth heard Elder Wen's words, he waved his hands at the scholarly middle-aged man at the side, who was already preparing to speak. The scholarly middle-aged man instantly closed the mouth that he had just opened, but there wasn't a single flash of unhappiness on his face. I assumed that with Qi Gaiyan's exceptional talents, she definitely wouldn't give out a criminal demand order due to a youth's one-time-off improper conduct. I believe this order is intended to test the waters. Elder Wen replied respectfully. Since it's testing the waters, then if I follow Elder Wen's suggestions and recruit this person into the army, won't I go against Qi Gaiyan's intentions? A trace of confusion appeared on the youth's face. I'm afraid the waters that she is testing isn't the same one we are thinking of. Elder Wen, please explain. At this moment, I'm still unable to guess Qi Gaiyan's intentions. However, no matter what they are, as long as this person is in our army, then the power would be in our hands. When that time comes, whatever Qi Gaiyan's intentions are, they would still be convenient for us. The youth nodded, but didn't immediately express his thoughts. He gazed in the direction of the Heaven Dao Pavilion, as if thinking of something. At this moment, within the Heaven Dao Pavilion, Lady Yuer was staring with shock at a piece of paper on her hands, then very quickly turned around and ran towards the garden in the rear court of the Heaven Dao Pavilion. Mrs. That little bastard attained the theory examination role champion. Rude. A gentle shout came from within the garden, then, a lady in a pink skirt walked out from the garden. Next time, refer to him as young Master Fong. The lady's gaze shot towards Lady Yuer, her tone filled with unquestionable grandeur. Yes, Mrs. Yuer knows her mistake. When Lady Yuer heard this, she instantly knelt down in fright. Ha! I never thought that this little bastard would indeed be rather hard-working. Capital Theory Examination Role Champion. The edges of the lady's mouth curved into a slight smile and looked up at the sky, her gaze that likened that of countless shining stars flashed with a faint light. Lady Yuer was stunned for a moment. Even though they were both ladies, but she was always shocked by her Mrs.'s appearance, especially when her Mrs. smiled. A beauty that collapsed nations, the beauty of a goddess. The news I wanted you to reveal to Han Changfeng, did you reveal it? Replying Mrs., I had already followed Mrs.'s orders and told Wang Anhua of the Southern Mountain Village Hall of Dao to pass the message. Indeed, as Mrs. had expected, when Han Changfeng received this piece of information, in front of the entire crowd, he revealed that little. Young Master Fong's incident about solving the illustration of all creation 8 years ago. I believe now this news should have been passed to Yen Capital. Yes, Han Changfeng won't have any other choices, he had to do this. Furthermore, I believe that this combat examination, Han Changfeng should already made his own arrangements. I wish to see how is that little bastard is going to pass the combat examination under such circumstances. Mrs. Yuer is somewhat confused. On one hand, you sent out the criminal demand order. On the other hand, you revealed the incident of young Master Fong solving the illustration of all creation to the world. These two incidents, one is harmful, while the other is beneficial. What are your intentions of doing so? Because, I want to confirm something. When the lady said this, a trace of light flashed across her eyes. What is that? Don't tell me there is still something in this world that Mrs. isn't able to understand. Lady Yuer's face was filled with confusion. It is indeed something that even I can't understand. The implications of this thing are too heavy, only when the results of the combat examination are out will I be able to confirm it absolutely. Something with too heavy implications. The confusion on Lady Yuer's face deepened further. She indeed couldn't understand, her Mrs. resided in the Heaven Dao Pavilion, what else could have such a huge implication? A few days later, All of the youths participating in the River of Trust Capital examination took off their brocade and flowery clothes, and changed into armors of all kinds. The reason was very simple. Today was the day of the combat examination. Chapter 100. Pocket Dimension. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. It was dawn, a gentle wind blew, and the air at the serene ink pond was as crisp and cooling as ever. Fang Zhengji liked to stay at the serene ink pond. A major reason was that the air here was similar to that of the northern mountain village. As usual, after breakfast, he wore his blue robe and left. However, this day, Yan Xiu had changed his usual attire. Dressed in armor, silk of all kinds wrapped around his arm. At his chest, he wore a silver breastplate. Even though it wasn't a full-body armor, it still looked exceptionally cold and smart. You are wearing this. Yan Xiu looked at Fang Zhengji's robe, and a trace of doubt appeared in his eyes. Ha! Why are you dressed like that? Fang Zhengji was also confused. He remembered that the previous combat examination in the county, he also wore a blue robe. Furthermore, the rest of the examinees participating in the examination were also similarly dressed. Today is the combat examination. Yan Xiu reminded. I know. Fang Zhengji nodded. When Yan Xiu saw Fang Zhengji nod his head, he thought for a moment and didn't speak further. The two of them walked shoulder to shoulder towards the direction of the capital office. The venue of this combat examination was also within the capital office of the River of Trust Capital. However, what was different from the theory examination was that people didn't have to wait in front of the capital office to await the start of the examination. Instead, they could directly enter the capital office. Hence, when Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu reached, other than the 2 rows of soldiers in front of the capital office door, there were few people walking around, and not too many people were waiting outside. Registration. A guard halted Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu. Then, the 2 people made a registration at the guarded table. Then, they each received a black metal tablet, with their names written on it. Fang Zhengji was rather curious, what was the use of this? He wanted to ask, but the guard didn't seem to have any intention of explaining, and from Yan Xiu's expression, it seemed that he had already knew about the existence of this long ago. Hence, Fang Zhengji thought for a while, and decided to ask Yan Xiu later on. They entered the capital office. Under the directions of the guard, Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu very quickly arrived at the rear court. The rear court was a piece of rather vast and plain land. There were flowers, grass, and a big tree. Other than that, what could be seen was a group of examinees wearing armors of all kinds. Not too long later, Han Changfeng, wearing a white official robe, appeared on a stage built in the rear court accompanied by a few imperial messengers. Boom! The gong sounded, signaling that the time for the combat examination had come. Han Changfeng stood up on the chair on top of the high stage, and walked forward 2 steps. Looking down at the examinees wearing armors of all kinds, he lightly nodded his head. Finally, his gaze landed on Fang Zhengji. Blinking slightly, a glimmer of shock seemed to flash across his eyes, but very quickly vanished again. Then, Han Changfeng coughed. This combat examination gathers the most talented scholars from the 5 capitals of the northern desert, as well as those from other places. In order to ensure that there wouldn't be too many fatal incidents, the Imperial Academy decided to fix the location within the pocket dimension. I believe everybody had seen the tablet on their hands. The rules are simple: pass the tests of the pocket dimension, ensure that you don't lose the tablet on your hands, then, successfully reach the center of the dimension. The Imperial messengers and I will be waiting for you there. I have to explain that if you encounter any dangers in the pocket dimension, you can immediately crush the tablet, then you will naturally be able to come out. But, crushing it also represents that you are disqualified. Understood. After Han Changfeng finished his sentence, he swept his gaze across the examinees below once again. Understood. The examinees instantly responded. However, Fang Zhengji was slightly taken aback. Pocket dimension. What's that? Crushing the tablet will result in disqualification. This combat examination seemed to have been different from what he imagined. Fang Zhengji looked around him. Everybody seemed to be hurriedly making their last preparations, and nobody seemed to have anything to ask. What is the pocket dimension? Fang Zhengji thought for a while, and in the end still glanced towards Yan Xiu. When Yan Xiu, who was preparing his breastplate, heard Fang Zhengji's question, he was evidently taken aback, and a trace of disbelief flashed across his eyes. You don't know. Cough. I never entered the Hall of Dao, you know that. Fang Zhengji found an excuse for himself. Oh. Yan Xiu nodded, and felt that he had forgotten his manners just now and seemed rather embarrassed. There are 3,000 volumes in the Law of Dao, hence there are 3,000 parallel dimensions, and millions of pocket dimensions. You have already accessed Dao, hence there should already be a pocket dimension within your heart. A pocket dimension within my heart. Fang Zhengji instantly understood. It seemed that the other world he saw was his own pocket dimension. Yes, I don't know what your pocket dimension looks like, because everybody's pocket dimension is different. This is determined by each person's method of accessing Dao. But the fundamentals that make up a pocket dimension won't change. Air, water, trees, earth, and so on. All these make up the fundamentals of a pocket dimension. Yan Xiu explained. Fang Zhengji nodded. At the very start, his pocket dimension was also made up of air and earth. Then, a seedling appeared, absorbing the moisture in the air and gradually condensing into pearls of water, seeping into the ground and constructing a cycle. At the end, the seedling grew into a huge tree that extended into the skies, and a lake was formed above the ground. When he thought of this, Fang Zhengji suddenly had a feeling. He seemed to have sensed a level of understanding which he had never sensed before. Everybody had a pocket dimension that belonged to themselves. Then the direction of training. Nov Om was it to consistently perfect this pocket dimension. Then, where is the place we are entering today? Even though Fang Zhengji more or less understood the concept of this pocket dimension, but he was still unclear about entering the pocket dimension to participate in the combat examination. The Imperial Academy consists of a few pocket dimensions of ancestors who have passed away. Entering such a pocket dimension would enable us to sense the Dao that our ancestors practiced. Yan Xiu explained again. Fang Zhengji finally understood. Everyone's pocket dimension was different. After a person passed away, if he used some special method to preserve this pocket dimension, it could allow descendants to sense the process of Dao. Looks like this world indeed has many mysterious things which he didn't know about. Pocket dimension. It shouldn't be as simple as a preservation. Crushing a token would enable one to exit the pocket dimension. This should be a pocket dimension that was improvised by descendants. An independent space. I wonder what the pocket dimension of this ancestor is going to be. The more Fang Zhengji thought, the more excited he became. Because, he felt, faintly, that entering the pocket dimension would help him to seek his future direction of practicing. Then, he looked at Yan Xiu and suddenly felt like something was amiss. All of you knew that you had to enter the pocket dimension. Hence, changed your attire. Fang Zhengji looked at Yan Xiu's attire, as if understanding something. Yes, I thought that you had known. Yan Xiu nodded. Fang Zhengji swept his gaze around, and finally landed on the body of a youth. That was a youth whose figure was somewhat similar to his. Of course, most importantly, that armor the youth was wearing looked very pretty.